Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is time, as the logo there shows, for the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion to return. No longer really considered the off-season in our world. And the reason I'm doing it today instead of tomorrow when the outlooks begin from the National Hurricane Center is because I'm going to be flying tomorrow. I'm going to Texas. I will explain that in just a minute. So you get this a day early. And so this is May 14th, 2021. But this does officially begin the roughly daily Hurricane Outlook and Discussion videos. They will be every day when I can. If I'm traveling and there's not much to talk about, then we won't have them every day. But you get the idea. They're going to be a lot more regular than just once per week. So welcome back to the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. So first of all, yes, I'm traveling tomorrow. Going to be heading over to Texas. We're going to do some work with my good friend and colleague Brent Lynn, who has flown up from the Virgin Islands. We need to do some testing of our weather balloon once again, as well as some other things we're trying to do over in Tornado Alley. This is for today, slight risk for today. If we look out there for tomorrow and the next couple of days, also a slight risk. Not a big tornado threat at all, and only isolated supercells out here, but there's a lot of work for us to do testing the weather balloon in this environment. Much easier to do than doing it over here where I live with all the trees and population centers and whatnot. It's just a lot easier to utilize this area of the Great Plains when testing high altitude balloons. So we're going to do that with the backdrop of this severe weather over the next several days. In fact, I will be out there through this time next week. So as we go through the next few days, I think these will all begin to increase over time. There's an upper level low that's going to work its way out of this region and eventually come into the Great Plains. That cold pool aloft and the instability associated with it and some return flow coming off the warm Gulf of Mexico should set up some boundaries through here with the dry line, isolated supercells, maybe scattered. That just means there's a few more of them. No major tornado outbreaks or anything like that I am seeing in the guidance or from any of the other high-profile chasers. But enough of an interest out there with some severe weather that not only will we be testing the weather balloon project, the original Herbie payload, the one that I built, as well as one that Brent has constructed out of carbon fiber. We'll talk about that later. I'll do a video all about that, probably on Sunday or Monday. But we're also going to try to do some other stuff taking advantage of the severe weather. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, this idea of putting up like rapid deployment cameras, mainly GoPros, a couple of live cams, and a few Kestrel weather sensors in front of a supercell just to see what we get. I just think it'll be neat. You know, use the equipment that we use in hurricanes and put it to good use out in Tornado Alley. I'm going to do the same thing over in the desert Southwest come monsoon season. And again, it's just expanding our universe, which we can do now thanks to the support that we have from our crowdfunding folks through Patreon. So that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm traveling tomorrow. And that's why the video is today. All right? So let's get on with it. The hurricane season basically begins tomorrow. You know, the National Hurricane Center is not officially changing the start date of the hurricane season this year, but tropical weather outlooks will begin tomorrow. It's weird. It's like, well, what's the difference? That's like saying, you know, I don't know. Think of it as just a precursor of what may be coming. Because over the last several years, we've had early season, preseason development. So that being said, a few things related to the tropics. This tweet yesterday from our good friend Ben Knoll that the ECMWF velocity potential climate model going out several months indicating lots of rising motion, and I will outline it in this blue color, over Africa and parts of the Indian Ocean, favoring strong tropical waves that get started in this region, move across Africa, and they seed the Atlantic is basically what it comes down to. And then we just have to see where they end up going. Nobody knows the answer to that, but this is a general favorable look. Just put a big plus here. This is a positive look for the Atlantic Basin over the next several months. There's August, there's September, and October. So that combined with the cooler sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific, which I'll show you in a minute, and other factors seem to indicate that, yes, we should have a fairly busy season. If you haven't followed Ben yet, this is what he's all about. Pretty popular guy, knows what he's talking about. I love his maps. We refer to Ben a lot. And this is all the information that he's talked about just in the last day or so. So check it out and see for yourself. Another sign of a busy season ahead. All right, so again, the National Hurricane Center is the foundation and the basis for all of our official forecasts and things related. Everybody now with a computer and any editing skills and a camera can post stuff on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and everybody's an expert. And in a world of everybody being an expert, we have to pay attention to where we pay attention. Does that make sense? And this doesn't mean that I am somehow superior to everybody else, but just be careful that a lot of people out there want to put stuff out to gain quick fame, lots of likes and subscribers on YouTube and whatever. And the way I look at it, I would rather be absolutely straight up with you and less hyperbolic, less sort of flamboyant with attention-grabbing headlines and posting 10-day European outlook, deterministic model output, showing a hurricane over some location. There's just no reason for that. I've done this long enough that, when the time comes and we have something serious, think back last year to Laura, and 16 years ago coming up now, Katrina. You get the idea. When the time comes, I'll get the bullhorn out and I'll make sure you're very aware that I am concerned about something. And in the meantime, let's just keep it real. Let's talk about what's really going on out there and what can affect you and what you can do about it. That's the bottom line. And try to keep it as stress-free as possible. A nice even playing field because there's enough stressors in the world out there already. So that being said, National Hurricane Center is, where we start with all this. And tomorrow they will have this area right here will be populated with the tropical weather outlook. The same thing for the Eastern Pacific. That'll all resume tomorrow. Although they just did some outlooks for the Eastern Pacific because, we just had our first named storm out there with Andres recently. Everything's changing, and I think we're going to eventually see the hurricane season begin for the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic on May 15th. But anyway, the outlooks begin tomorrow. I'll talk more about that in a minute, and actually a neat way for you to get that information early each and every day. All right? Well, a lot to talk about today. So, real quick, the SOI, look at that. That's a pretty good rise there in the 30-day all of a sudden. It takes longer to pull up the 90-day index, because it's based on a lot more statistical points. But generally speaking, look, the 30-day average is now back up over 5.5. The 90-day is creeping back up. The contributor today is a healthy plus 17. Why does this matter? Well, it's interesting because NOAA just declared that the La Nina that we were experiencing is officially over. We're now in neutral conditions across the equatorial Pacific. In other words, the water temperatures out that way along the equator from roughly off the coast of South America way out to the western Pacific are generally right where they should be. Maybe slightly cooler, but from the way they look at things, they just call it neutral. That being said, there is a lot of evidence to suggest from the climate models that we're going to sort of teeter back towards a dip in those temperatures, meaning maybe a return to weak La Nina conditions by the fall. So the SOI here is sort of a leading indicator of that when the SOI is positive, and strongly so, especially when it's trending positive, the pressure pattern across the Pacific is such that you can help to promote that La Nina. And typically when the number right here is +7 or higher, this is what the Bureau of Meteorology talks about from Australia, then we're more in that La Nina type pattern. And when it's significantly negative, then you trend towards El Nino. And look at what happened these last few months. Coming out of February, it was pretty positive. Then we went just slightly negative in March. But now in last month in April, slightly positive, and now we're up even more from that. So, with a couple weeks left in the month, plus or minus, We will see. Maybe these climate models know what they're talking about, so to speak. Heading back towards a weak La Nina is certainly in the realm of possibility. And this is the area that I'm talking about, right through here. Generally speaking, it's neither El Nino nor La Nina, just kind of right where it should be. However, that being said, all of this area to the north and to the south of the equator through here is colder than it should be. Colder than the long-term average, around, 20, 30 years we're looking at in the background state. So departures from normal, the Pacific's basically a big negative overall. In the Atlantic, clearly it's a big positive. Now the main development region right through here is cooler than average right now, mostly speaking, or right at it. It's not screaming warm like this is in the subtropics. And let me say something about that. I've been seeing a few people on Twitter and even a couple of message boards suggesting that, the MDR, the main development region, and again, that's this area right through here where you do typically see long track hurricanes go through there. There's this sort of notion that if that is not running above average, that you can't have a hyperactive season. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not at all worried about whether or not we have a hyperactive season. My sports analogy hat, I don't have a hat nearby, but you get the idea. Who cares necessarily if your team wins the game by 40 points? Let's say it's basketball, college basketball, or college football. You just want them to win, right? You don't have to win by some record amount. Just win the darn championship or whatever. That's what it comes down to. And the same kind of applies here. A hyperactive season like we had last year with 30 named storms, the ones that really mattered did not form and become long-track hurricanes in the main development region and hit the United States. Neither did the ones in 2005. Katrina, nope. Emily started in the MDR, the western part, affected Mexico as a very strong hurricane. Dennis did. Rita, Wilma, Katrina, those big ones for the United States, all of them had their origins very close to our part of the world already. They did not track all the way across and make landfall like we saw, for example, in 2008 with Hurricane Ike, 2004 with Francis, and there's many other examples. Gloria, that was kind of a long track, but there's just a lot of emphasis placed on this area when this is where most of us live over here. We certainly have a group of folks down here. We worry about them, yes, but this sort of like, if it's not warm in the MDR, then we can't have a busy season. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about where whatever forms ends up. You think about Sally last year, those last few hours, boom, made landfall darn near Category 3 in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach area, Pensacola Beach. Laura, that last day or so, really coming together. Zeta, which we now know was a Cat 3 at landfall. These short fuse systems close to home, the MDR has nothing to do with that at all. These homegrown systems that only give us a day or two to watch and see what happens. So we'll see. And, this all can change right out here in just a couple weeks' time. It's early. It's May. The rest of the Atlantic is warm. The subtropics are warm. There's no El Nino. We got this upward motion stuff from Ben suggesting all this tropical wave activity. Yeah, I think it's going to be a busy season, and we darn well better be ready, considering we're still dealing with a lot of after effects and even still, during effects of the pandemic and the supply chain issues. This gas shortage that we've seen across, especially my area, and only till last night was I able to get gas. We got to be ready, folks. We got to keep on our toes and not be caught unaware, thinking that we know it all. If the MDR is not warm enough, then it won't be a busy season. Anyway, let me get back focused here. Look at this. This is neat, this satellite animation from Tropical Tidbits. Strong westerly winds, southwesterly, cutting across from the Pacific, across the Caribbean, the Northwest Caribbean anyway, and even over here coming out of the Eastern Caribbean, across our friends in Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago. That's typical for this time of year. That's what you would expect to see. Water temperatures throughout this area might be warm all through here, yes, but the strong upper level winds are going to prevent most activity from getting going until later on, late June through July, August, September. That's when we start really looking at the open Atlantic. So get used to this satellite shot, a nice infrared shot, animation from Tropical Tidbits. We will reference it a lot. Out here in the eastern Pacific, a few blobs to look at, clusters of convection or showers and thunderstorms, but nothing organizing just yet. But I think that'll change in the coming weeks. I'll show you why in just a moment. All right, real quick, water temperatures, the actual temperatures. Remember, these are anomalies, departures from normal. These are the actual temperatures, and they're warming up. 21 Celsius or so right off my neck of the woods. 26, 27 Celsius out on the Gulf Stream. Give it a couple more weeks by the time Memorial Day gets here. Pretty much everybody south of Virginia Beach can enjoy the beach without freezing their you-know-what's off. All right? Elsewhere in the Gulf, it's almost good everywhere. A little bit of colder shelf water up here. Some of this because of the pattern, some of it because of the runoff and the rainwater and whatnot. But everywhere else, 26 Celsius or higher. Pretty much the entire Gulf, with the exception of the northern parts near the shelf, what we call the shelf water region, right through here. Most of the Gulf of Mexico is primed and ready to go, sea surface temperature-wise. And in fact, look down here. That's 30 degrees Celsius tucked up in here just north of the Keys in the Florida Bay area. Close to mid-80s down here off of Naples, if we're talking Fahrenheit. Remember, this is Celsius. All these maps that we see, scientific base, so they're usually in Celsius. The metric system's used for most scientific purposes. 82 degrees Fahrenheit is roughly 28 Celsius. 30 Celsius is around 85. And these 30 Celsius readings around Cuba and tucked up right in here, that's toasty. Definitely. That's my kind of water. All right, so another thing to get used to, this map right here, this layer of the atmosphere. The GFS is a great computer model. It's not perfect. None of them are perfect. The European, the ECMWF, might have higher skill scores depending on what parameter you look at. But it's not like the GFS is supremely inferior, if that makes sense. This is a good model, and we can see it every 6 hours or whatever it is here from Levi's website, Tropical Tidbits. There's other websites that produce this. The INSUP site itself from NOAA. So I like to show this because it's easy to do, and it's free. Supported by Google Ads and Patreon and so forth and so on, depending on what site you use. So why do I like this level of the atmosphere? It's 5,000 feet up. You see that right there. Actually, I clicked on the wrong darn thing. Hold on. It's been a while. I want 850 millibars. There we go. Now we got it right. So I'm glad I noticed. GFS 850 millibars. That's about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. And I like this layer because it shows us the vorticity, or the spin in the atmosphere, very easily. So we can identify where it's stretched out like taffy, typically along a front or a storm system like an upper level low that'll have a big, not feeder band, but a band of energy or a band of vorticity in the atmosphere. So what we're looking for is down in the tropics, or even in the subtropics, for any of these areas to kind of bundle up and become circular, focus that energy. And when that happens, especially over the tropics, over this very warm water out here, all other things being equal, you get tropical cyclones to develop. So what I typically like to do is look out about 5 to 7 days, and that's it. There's no reason to go beyond that time frame. So here's 24 hours out. This is valid tomorrow morning around the time that I'll be flying out of Wilmington. And, you don't see anything down there in the Caribbean or the Gulf of any consequence. 3 days out, same kind of thing. But I will draw your attention to all of this energy over the plains states. That will help to trigger some showers and thunderstorms. And then here's the flow at the 5,000 foot level that I was talking about coming out of the Gulf. It's not real strong. That's why we're not seeing any major severe weather outbreaks with big violent tornadoes or anything. But that is a decent moisture fetch coming in from the Gulf here, feeding into this disturbance moving out of the Great Basin and the southwest. So yeah, it'll be an interesting time out there. But as far as the tropics, look, there's nothing really down here. All this vorticity, any of these little areas you see are weak, and nothing is congealing, coming together to create anything to worry about. Going out to day 4, same kind of thing. Day 5, nope, nothing to really worry about in the tropics. But I tell you, that's an interesting look overall for Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. And there's that flow of moisture feeding right into it. So there will be numerous showers and thunderstorms at times. Heavy rain, hail cores, maybe a few tornadoes, sure, but not a massive, like, thousands of chasers headed out there kind of moderate or high risk kind of event, which is good. That'll help kind of keep the population low and make it a little safer for Brent and I to do what we need to do. Now, going beyond 5 days, here's day 6, and then here's day 7. Interesting. What happens? Well, look at that. A little piece of energy. There's the big old high pressure area sitting over the eastern and mid-Atlantic states. And then down here, kind of squeezed in it, convergence taking place, air coming together, maybe a stalled front down there, a focusing mechanism. And so what happens is by day 6 and 7, something tries to get going, at least in the GFS. A little impulse in the warm water area. Yep, maybe, just maybe, we'll be seeing something before the hurricane season officially starts once again. So this will be what I will focus on in my updates. I won't have an update tomorrow because I'm traveling and we got to pick up a bunch of equipment and everything. But Sunday, Monday, I should have these videos for you. And I got something else to tell you about too. But yes, we might be watching something over the next few days developing in the Atlantic Basin before the season ever gets going. Hopefully not, to be honest with you. I mean, I like tracking hurricanes. It's my job, but it's too early. It really is. And I got other stuff I got to do. And as I say, pardon the grammar, but ain't nobody got time for that. But we'll watch it and see what's happening. I know a few people on Twitter are watching it closely. Those that are in the know, they know what to look for, and I will reference them as we move on. All right, real quick, check this out. A new podcast available to everybody. I have a podcast that is exclusive for our patrons on Patreon. That is called Stories from the Hurricane Highway. It is a weekly, long-format podcast where I go into great detail about my career over the years, and that is exclusive to our patrons. This one, Hurricane Season, the podcast, is available to everybody on pretty much any device of choice, that's modern and gets podcasts or RSS feeds. It's on Spotify, Google Podcast. Apple takes a little longer to approve things, so we're still waiting for it to hit Apple. But, it's anchor.fm. Let me get rid of my mug there, and you can see, /HurricaneTrack. That's where it is on Anchor. Anchor does like 80% of the podcast distribution out there. Great service, and it's free. That's amazing. They're owned by Spotify, so that helps. But anyhow, this is the podcast called Hurricane Season, the podcast, and subscribe to it. What is it? Why is it important? Why should you care? Because it'll be a daily audio podcast, several minutes long, not lengthy like these video discussions, to kind of get you started, looking at the keys to the game for the day or days ahead. It'll drop every morning by about 8 a.m. Eastern Time throughout the hurricane season. And I can be anywhere and just use my iPhone and put that sucker together, and Anchor FM takes care of the rest. So find it on your podcast service of choice. Go to anchor.fm if you're not sure about it, /HurricaneTrack, and you'll see what you need to do. And that'll be available to all starting tomorrow. I have a little trailer out right now for it, but it officially debuts tomorrow morning. I'll put that together before I get on the plane and head out to Texas. Also, our new tracking maps are available, and I got one right here. Show you how big it is, give you a sense of scale. Look at that. Nice size poster. And I used to print these by the hundreds of thousands back in the early days of my career for TV and radio stations, as well as big box retailers like Lowe's. We would ship them all around the country. Big 28 by 40. They were actually bigger than this one. And that's how I got my start in this. The early days of my funding and other projects, award-winning some of it. And, after computers and apps and whatever, people kind of lost the art of tracking on a decent paper tracking map. There's still a few companies that put the guides out these days. Government agencies have put out a 8x14, 8.5x14 tracking map. It's part of a hurricane guide. But that is the real deal. It's on really nice, high-quality paper. It's 18 by 24 inches. You saw how big it is. And they're available in limited quantities. I can only print up so many. We give these away to our patrons at the $25 tier. It comes with that membership level, but I've always produced a few extras in case people outside of the Patreon world would like to purchase one. They're $18 plus $4 for shipping. This year I send them out in a mailing tube. Remember Twister when he says, roll the maps? Well, that's what I do. I roll them. I don't fold them up and put them in an envelope anymore. I send them in a nice sturdy tube so they look nice when you get them, because they're $18 and they should look nice. So get it, put it on your wall, track this year's storms. And just so you know, right there is the new supplemental list of names that replaces the names from the Greek alphabet. Adria, or whatever it is, that I can't even read my own. Let me just grab my map. Yes, it's Adria, Braylon, Caridad, Deshaun, Emery, Foster, so forth and so on. If we run out of the list of names, the 21 that starts with Anna, Bill, Claudette, that's the new name, new set of names. And God forbid if we go through all 21 names this year, I'm going to have a lot more bags under my eyes. Anyway, that's how you get it. HurricaneTrack.com/track map. I will put the link in the description of today's video. I think I've got about 44 left out of the inventory. And once they're gone, that's it. I'm not printing anymore. They cost like $1.25 to print or something like that. And that's not cheap. These are good quality paper. All right, we are on Patreon and Hurricane Track Insider connected those. You know what Patreon is? Well, if you don't, get the Patreon app or go to their website, patreon.com. It's a way for people to support, as fans, the creators that they know and love very well. You want to keep supporting their content. And in our case, it's exclusive live video feeds, the podcast I was telling you about, Stories from the Hurricane Highway. Our new series, The Hurricane Highway Season 2, will be available starting in June, exclusively on Patreon first. And then eventually it'll make its way onto YouTube and the public realm, and hopefully Amazon Prime Video. They've been changing the rules there, so I'm not sure. But that's what we do with Patreon. We help to fund our operations and grow things and do a lot more cool stuff each and every year thanks to the support from people like you. All right, I'm going to shut up and put this on YouTube for you and get ready to go to Texas. And I'll talk to you again while I'm out there. It is almost hurricane season. It's great to be back with you, mostly on a daily basis. I look forward to providing these videos as often as I can. If you got questions or comments, just keep it civil and to the point in the YouTube comments. I love hearing from you. Keep it up. I appreciate it. I am Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track. I'll talk to you again probably on Sunday.